Wakona kesalam wet higainin. May we hear was. Wakas care was see. Akait see how we have now it he was.
I wonder if everyone is up. It is morning. We are alive, so thanks be. Rise up, look about. Go see the horses, lest the wolves have killed one. Thanks be that the children are alive, and you older men, and you older women. Also that your friends are perhaps alive in other camps. Today, we are known as the Nepe. The name, Nepe, which is French for pierced nose, was mistakenly given to us by the first French-Canadian fur trappers to visit our country. As a tribe, we did not practice the custom of piercing our noses. We are Eteya and Mamayats, children of the coyote. We are Tupnit Pelu, the people who walk out of the mountains. We are Nemepu, people. We were born to this country, and before the coming of others, our traditional homeland covered almost 17 million acres over parts of several present-day states. It covered some of the southeast corner of Washington, the northeast corner of Oregon, and much of north-central Idaho. For thousands of years, we fished salmon and steelhead, and according to oral tradition, hunted game from mammoths to buffalo, gathered mussels, berries, wild-growing foods, duck chemists, and other roots, and shared cultures, lifeways in the land with numerous other tribes. We never did any farming, but we made our living from the things provided for us by the Great Spirit Chief, maker of the universe. Today you would say, provided for us by God. We've always believed in the Creator and tried to live our lives in His way. Our families were always strong and were the strength of our villages. Our children were raised and educated with the help of relatives. In each village, the people chose a council that named and advised a headman. The headman was the most influential person in the village, but he couldn't overrule the council.
Our way of life was our religion, and we believed that if we properly observed our rituals in this life, our souls would reach an afterworld, where life would continue. We didn't believe in a better happy hunting ground or a hell. We lived close to our Mother Earth and loved our homeland. To Hoholuzut one of our spiritual leaders from the old days, expressed how we feel about this land when he said, "The earth is part of my body. I belong to the land out of which I came. The earth is my mother."
Our traditional relationship with the earth was more than just a reverence for the land. It was knowing that every living thing was placed here by the Creator and that we were part of a sacred relationship entrusted with the care and protection of our Mother Earth. We could not stand apart from our environment. Old Joseph said it this way: "The earth and myself are one mind. Understand me fully with reference to my affection for the land. I never said the land was mine to do with as I chose. The one who has a right to dispose of it is the one who created it. I claim the right to live on my land and accord you the privilege to live on yours." By the 1800s, we were reaching the height of our influence in the plateau area. We became wealthy and powerful after we got the horse. Some of our bands had herds of more than 1,000. We were one of the few native peoples on the continent who selectively bred horses. We favored and bred any color or kind of horse as long as it was fast, intelligent, and pleased us. The horse brought many changes in our fortunes and lifestyles, but none so dramatic as the changes that occurred after meeting Lewis and Clark. We had long been aware of the white man, whom we considered the source of many desirable possessions, including guns, knives, ironware, and other articles. In fact, some of these items had already been traded to us from the East, the South, and the Pacific Coast. Lewis and Clark entered our homeland in 1805. On September 20th, after floundering in snowstorms and almost starving in the Bitterroot Mountains, Clark and 6 hunters arrived at the Wee-Eye Prairie, where a fall encampment of nez perces were digging Klamath roots. At a distance of 1 mile from the lodges, wrote Clark of this first encounter, "I met 3 Indian boys. When they saw me, they ran. I searched the grass and found 2 of the boys, gave them small pieces of ribbon and sent them forward to the village. Soon after, a man came out to meet me with great caution and conducted me to a large, spacious lodge.
Years ago, my granddad told me about Lewis and Clark coming into the country, and there was a Sacagawea, a young Shoshone, was in the party. And then since the Shoshones were the traditional enemies, the nez perces suspected a trick and made plans to feed and kill Lewis and Clark. And fortunately, there was an elderly woman at the Wea camp that had lived among white people somewhere in the east. She had been kidnapped, and after a long time, she had made it back to her people. Anyway, while she was gone, she had been treated kindly by some white people. She advised her people to receive them in friendship because they were of the people that helped her.
Lewis and Clark had told us that one of their goals was to establish peace among the tribes so that trading houses could be built and the people could trade for the white man's goods in safety. Shortly thereafter, traders, trappers, and mountain men began making their way to our homeland. The people, thinking that it was a direct result of Lewis and Clark's promise, greeted the newcomers with friendship. They came from Canada and the United States. We traded our own products like food, clothing, and horses. but we were unwilling to trap beaver or work for the Canadian fur companies. We preferred traveling and trading with the more generous and easygoing American mountain men. Along with the Flatheads and Eastern Shoshones, we began going to the Americans' annual rendezvous in 1827, sharing in the feasting, gambling, and celebrations. The peace and friendship that we had pledged to Lewis and Clark was made known to all of our villages and passed on from generation to generation. The Nez Perces believed that power came to people from religion. Power, which included material goods, gave you advantage over others. Curiosity about the seemingly more powerful supernatural ideas of the white man planted the seed for a disruptive change.
The Nez Perces had learned a little about Christianity and what was called the Book of Heaven from the fur traders. In 1831, 4 Nez Perces were sent to St. Louis to find more about it. George Catlin, the famous Western artist, painted their picture. In fact, 2 of the pictures are hanging in the Spalding Church. Anyway, they were told that teachers and Bibles would be sent to the Nez Perces. 2 of the men became sick and died in St. Louis, and they were buried there. The 3rd man died on a boat returning up the Missouri River, and the 4th one rejoined his band on the western Montana plains. He managed to get the message back to the people before he was killed in a battle with the Blackfeet. In response to the request of the 4 Nez Perces, Dr. Marcus Whitman and his wife Narcissa were sent as missionaries in 1836. They were accompanied by Reverend Henry Spalding and his wife Eliza. The Whitman settled among the Cayuse near what is now Walla Walla, while the Spaldings settled among the Nez Perces at Lapwai. The missionaries brought a lot of change. For instance, the Nez Perces who became Christians gave up the regalia and long hair.
Henry Spalding's first Presbyterian converts were 2 leading headmen called Timothy and Joseph. Joseph was the leader of the Olawa band and father of the now famous Chief Joseph. Despite a good beginning, trouble gradually developed. Believing himself savior to a people who had no religion, Spalding had little tolerance for our cultural beliefs and practices. And that intolerance eventually led old Joseph to spurn his friendship with the white man and to rip up his Bible. Spalding caused a rift between the Nez Perces who seemed to want to become Christians and those who ignored him. These divisions eventually took opposite sides on the Treaty of 1855 in the selling of the land. The Treaty Council of 1855 was called by Isaac I. Stevens, Governor and Superintendent of Indian Affairs for the new territory of Washington. Congress had given him the responsibility of finding the best route for a railroad to the Pacific. As Superintendent of Indian Affairs, Stevens chose to clear Indians from the route of his railroad as well as from the lands needed by the new settlers that the trains would bring. 35 years old and a politician, Isaac Stevens, willing to use any means, finally threatened to bring in the army if the tribes didn't sign the treaty. After the signing, we were relatively sure that what land we had retained would remain ours. Then, disaster really struck. Gold was discovered above Wee-Eye Prairie, and the rush was on. By June of 1862, 3,500 Nez Perces were faced with more than 18,000 strangers living on the reservation. The friction of our clashing cultures became so commonplace that soon the miners were calling on the government to move us somewhere else. Congress responded by making a new treaty in 1863 and appropriating $50,000 to buy off the lands that had been overrun. the two Nez Perce factions came together and decided that the pro-treaty bands could do whatever they wanted with their land, but the non-treaty bands would return home and never sell. Unfortunately, their land was included in the sale by the treaty makers, who had no right to do so. In April of 1877, when the Snake and the Salmon rivers were in flood and dangerous to cross, General O.O. Howard ordered the Eastern Oregon bands, two-thirds of whom were elders, women, and children, onto the reservation at Lapwai. During a last gathering in freedom on the Camas Prairie, a young warrior and two of his friends set out for the Salmon River to avenge the death of his father. 4 white men, who were known for their hatred and mistreatment of Indians, were killed, and retribution was unavoidable. Still hoping for peace, the Nez Perces withdrew to safer grounds at Whitebird Canyon. On June 17th, as a small group of Army regulars and volunteers approached the camp, 4 Nez Perces rode out under a flag of truce to meet them. 2 shots were fired by a volunteer. The Nez Perce attacked, and the army was quickly overrun and withdrew to Grangeville. The war that no one really wanted had begun. The non-treaty bands knew that more soldiers would follow and decided that a fighting retreat to Canada would be the best protection for their families. This lasted 4 months, covered more than 1,500 miles, and culminated in surrender at Bear Paw, Montana, 42 miles short of the Canadian border. Following 8 years of exile in Oklahoma, 118 of the survivors returned to Lapwai. 149 others, including Chief Joseph, were further exiled to the Colville Reservation in eastern Washington.
Our traditional land holdings consisted of approximately 13 million acres. The 1855 treaty reduced the size of our homeland to 7.5 million acres. After the gold rush, the 1863 treaty was made. This left us with approximately 750,000 acres. In 1887, Congress enacted a law known as the Dawes Act, which was designed to break up reservations and to assimilate the Indian into the mainstream. When the law came into effect in 1895, the tribe held 35,000 acres in common ownership, with 50,000 acres coming under individual allotments. Thus, our reservation was further reduced as our remaining 664,000 acres was open to settlement.
A lot of old feelings between the treaty and the non-treaty Nez Perce still exist to this day. But that's okay, because it's always been our way to appreciate the differences. Deep down, we are all Nez Perce and we all care about one another. The Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 eventually enabled us to set up a strong form of self-government. Though not exactly like the old Chiefs Council, the Nez Perce Tribal Executive Committee, elected by the General Council, is guiding us into the future.
called a special meeting this morning to discuss unemployment on the reservation, but at this time we have Mr. Wilfred Scott and Gordon Heigl absent on delegation. But one of the issues that has been on the reservation here for many years, and that's the unemployment of tribal members.
The Nez Perce tribal government cooperates with many other governments in seeking a better life for the people and works to keep the Nez Perce culture alive. This is evidenced by the continuing support of the Nez Perce National Historical Park, with its headquarters and interpretive center at Spalding, Idaho, where so much of our history occurred. The culture and history of the Nez Perce is not over, any more than the history of the United States is over. Our people's story continues to unfold, much of it proving that even the story of our yesterdays is still alive. Even though change is evident everywhere, many of our ancient ways, including the use of medicine people and sweat houses, still live on among us. In this new era of Indian self-determination, we are proud to be Nez Perce, proud of our culture and history, and proud of our ancestors, who, despite their many trials, sufferings, and differences, bequeathed to us a homeland and a living heritage. We are Ichie and Mamayats, children of the Coyote. We are Tupnitpelu, the people who walk out of the mountains. We are Nemepu, people.